Your Holiness, I will speak about power and care in organizations, in the places in which most of us work every day, in businesses, in nonprofits, in schools, in hospitals. And over the last 2 days, we've spoken about a new way to hold power and care that seems to be emerging in the world right now. And I've been interested to see what could that mean very practically. How could that change the organizations in which we work? Because I don't know to what degree you're familiar with this, but everywhere, at least in the Western world, people are increasingly disillusioned with the places they work. More and more managers are leaving their businesses. More and more nurses and doctors are leaving hospitals. Teachers are leaving their schools because the places they work and the way power is held there hurts their integrity, feels inhospitable to the longings of their soul. And I believe that in many ways that is a good sign. I think we see an old system that is dying and a new system that is starting to emerge. And actually quite a lot of psychologists and philosophers have written about this new consciousness that is emerging. People like Robert Kegan at Harvard and Jenny Wade and philosophers like Ken Wilber. So we know what is emerging on an individual level as people grow into new ways of looking at the world. And I've been interested to look at, okay, but what then happens in organizations? So I've been researching really extraordinary organizations that have been founded or led by people who have done some inner work, sometimes some spiritual development, and from this new perspective felt that the way we normally structure and run organizations just didn't feel right for them. The way we're told we should exercise power in organization doesn't feel right for them. And so they went on an incredible and so they started experimenting like crazy, really throwing out everything we're being told in business school. And what was fascinating for me was that after much experimentation, what they ended up with, even though they often thought they were the only ones doing this, was remarkably similar. So it seems that there's like something in the air that different people catch at the same time about new possibilities to structure and run organizations. And I've looked at a great number of organizations, and then I decided I would study in depth organizations, whatever their industry, whatever their geography. But they needed to be at least a bit large, at least 100 employees. And for at least 5 years, they should have been operating along these new principles, along this new consciousness that the psychologists write about. And to my great surprise and delight, I found a number of organizations that had not only a few hundred people, but some organizations had a few thousand people, or more than 10,000 people, very large organizations that were already operating with radically new ways to hold power and care. And some of them had been operating like this for 10, 20, 30, 40 years in all sorts of sectors and industries. And really, these organizations are very, very different. We have to wrap our mind around how they operate. And one of the big differences is that they have a different metaphor to talk about the organization. In our current scientific materialist paradigm, people talk about organizations like a machine. Actually, we talk about everything like a machine. The human body is a machine, the world is a machine. And very consistently, these new organizations use a different image. They say, no, we are a living organism. Our organization is like a living being. And that change of image has very profound implications. And it comes with, I believe, at least 3 fundamental breakthroughs. And the first one is that so far, we always believed that to run an organization, we needed a pyramid. A boss and then layers of hierarchy. That's the way that power works in an organization. And what we see emerging now is organizations of thousands of people that operate in self-organizing ways, entirely without levels of hierarchy, entirely without anyone being the boss of anyone else and anyone else being subordinate. And that sounds crazy, right? I mean, that's not possible. You cannot have thousands of people in an organization. Come on, at some point you need a boss. That sounds crazy. That sounds crazy until you realize that actually the most complex systems in the world, which are natural systems, have been operating like this for billions of years. Right? The human brain with 85 billion cells, or just any one cell, or a complex ecosystem like a forest, operates in self-organizing manner. And what is extraordinary, I think, at this time in history is that different people are understanding at the same time how to import these principles that operated in nature for billions of years, how to bring them into our organizations. And that changes the nature of power radically. It's no longer power over, it's interconnected power, it's power with. And the fascinating thing is there are enough of these organizations out there for us to actually know very practically how this works. This is no longer a mystery. We know, sort of like with acupuncture points, what are the structures and processes that need to be different for this to work. So we now know, okay, no pyramid, so what is the structure? Not top-down decision-making. Also, by the way, no consensus, no endless discussion. But we know how to make decisions in these. We know how to do very practical things. If there's conflict, but there's no boss. If there's conflict, but there's no boss, how do we deal with it? We now know how to do this. Who gets a pay raise at the end of the year? Very practical questions. We know how to do this. And a group of dozens of volunteers is building, by the way, a wiki that details all of these with practical examples. A second breakthrough is maybe best understood by those people who have a bit of a spiritual perspective. And that is that all wisdom traditions, in some ways, say that there's really 2 ways to look at the world. We can approach the world from a place of fear and separation and scarcity, or we can approach the world from a place of love and connection and abundance. And in most organizations, because there's subtle fears in these organizations, we felt that it's actually safe to be separated. It's actually safe to wear a mask, to not show our deepest concerns and longings. And what some of these organizations I have researched have found is when we show up behind a mask, only showing a small part that feels safe, that feels acceptable, we're also only showing a very small part of our energy, of our creativity, of our passion. And so there are some organizations out there who look at work as a place to live into wholeness. They've found ways, which some spiritual traditions have known for thousands of years, to create a safe space where it feels safe enough to show up with all of who we are, to actually discover who we are, in a way that is incredibly caring. There's some organizations, like 3 different organizations, where I heard people say something like, you know, sometimes I wish my home was more like my work. Because there's so much care, because we've created consciously a safe container. And again, we know how to do this. There's a number of different things that we need to upgrade. Starting, for those who know the term, with all of the basic HR processes. Because those is typically the place where fear starts, in recruitment and yearly evaluations and these things. And the third breakthrough has to do with purpose and how we look at the future. In today's machine view, we need to predict and control the world. Right? And we have tools in organizations. We make strategic plans and 5-year plans and then yearly budgets and then targets so that we know where we're going, we predict and control the future. And what some of these people in these organizations say is that no longer makes sense to us. We believe that the organization isn't a lifeless machine that we need to program. It's a living organism that has its own sense of destiny, its own energy, its own thing it wants to manifest in the world. And so our role as leaders is much humbler. It's actually just simply to listen to where does this organization want to go and to go with it. And some people call that, we just sense into purpose. We listen into what does this organization want to do. And again, it changes a number of things. For instance, none of the organizations I researched, all of which are spectacularly successful, has a strategic plan. And that sounds crazy, but they have different ways to listen to where does this organization want to go. And so again, we kind of know now how to do this. So this is what I briefly wanted to share with you, is that as there's a new consciousness emerging in the world, there is very practical ways to shift to a new way to bring power and care into organizations. That brings radically more life, more power, more purpose, more meaning. And this isn't a theory, this isn't a model, this is real stuff that exists out there and more are popping up. So if we know where to look, we can already see the new emerging. And I feel this is a message of hope for all of us and everyone here in the room who is leading, participating in an organization, a school, a business, a hospital, that if something hurts your integrity, hurts your soul in the way we run things, there's inspiration out there for you to look for how to do things differently. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Your Holiness, before I ask for your intervention, could I ask Frederick just to give us one practical example that you've worked with? But
Yeah, there are many. And because we're in Belgium, it's such a beautiful example. There's one next door in the Netherlands. And it's a home care organization, so nurses that don't work in a hospital but go to the home, often of old people. And it's such an interesting story because it shows how we traditionally, the machine way to think about this, and then the living organism. In the 1980s, the machine way to think about management took over in Holland. And the state said, you know, in order to make savings, let's force all the nurses that worked independently to be together in organizations. And we'll have economies of scale. So they forced the nurses to go into large organizations. And then a whole logic took over. They started... They started saying, oh, but the nurses still have their personal clients, and that makes it difficult to fill their days. Sometimes they have halls where they get paid to wait for a client. So they created a call center, took away the phones from the nurses, and had a new system where clients didn't have their personal nurse, but just depending on which nurse was free and close by, they could just send whatever nurse. And then they realized that the more experienced nurses, you have to pay them more. So let them do only the complicated stuff. And all the rest we give to cheap nurses out of school. And then they realized some nurses are faster than others. So let's define times. So giving a shower is 15 minutes, giving a shot is 10 minutes. Changing a compression stocking is 2.5 minutes. And then they said, oh, but this is great, now we can do planning. And so next to the call center, they created a planning department. And now a nurse gets a sheet of paper that says, you start at 8 o'clock, you change your compression stocking, you're out again at 8:02. Google Map calculates it takes 6 minutes to drive to the next client. And then you have a shot 10 minutes. And then they said, oh, this is great, now we can do continuous improvement. And they asked the nurses to put barcode stickers in front of the doors. And they have to scan in when they go in and out. And now the managers can look at all this data and say, you know what? It's with showers that you always lose 1 or 2 minutes. So let us train you on how to give more efficient showers. And that all makes sense from the machine paradigm. Why would you not do it? It makes the thing cheaper, so we can help more people. And in the middle of this, of course, clients and nurses hated it. You have to imagine, as often an old person, somewhat confused. You see a new nurse coming in every day, you have to re-explain everything. The nurse looks and, oh, you need a shot. And then the client says, no, yeah, but I called the doctor, it has changed a little bit. I'm sorry, I have no time. And God. And it hurts the nurses deeply in their integrity. Because they often know they do bad work, but they have no time. And in the middle of all this is one of these nurses, Jos de Blok, who said, I cannot take this. And he created Buurtzorg. In the beginning, 4 people, and he simply said, the purpose for me is not to give efficient shots, it's for patients to lead rich and autonomous lives. And so a nurse at Buurtzorg takes time takes time to sit down, drink coffee with the old person and says, what is it that you can still do in life? What is it you no longer can do? Oh, you have children that could help you, but they don't help you because you don't get along. Maybe I can help you reestablish dialogue. They do incredibly beautiful things. They go back to a model where one person just sees one or two nurses and they develop a beautiful, deep, caring relationship. And the result of that is that Bürzorg 10 years ago was founded with 4 people. There are 14,000 now. Because all the nurses want to work for them. They receive 250 CVs. Can we please work for you? They went from 0 to, I think now, it changes so quickly, 70–75% market share. And the most interesting thing is that there's been some financial studies, because you can say, of course it's easy to give good care if you drink coffee, but we're trying to get every minute. But they found that Bürzorg only uses 40% of the hours prescribed by doctors because patients become autonomous so much faster. So a total paradox. As compared to these other organizations who try to squeeze every minute out of it, if you drink coffee, you're actually saving the Dutch state hundreds of millions of euros every year. And very quickly, Bürzorg, 14,000 nurses, all organized in teams of 10 to 12 nurses. There is no team leader. They have a tiny headquarters of 25 people for 14,000. There's no head of finance, no head of HR, no head of marketing. There's no marketing. And it would take me too long to explain you how it works, but they're just incredibly efficient and incredibly caring, including among the nurses. So nurses will help each other out. When they encounter deep problems of, I have this patient in terminal care, and it reminds me of my own mother dying, and I'm not sure I can handle this. Nurses will help each other out, and they have formats to do this in ways that are just marvelous. So just to give you, I hope, a glimpse, a sense. And the fascinating thing is, the nurses are the same, the syringes, the bandages are the same. The only thing that changes is how we view the world. Right?